Okay, here's another recording. I'm sorry there's no light here. Not that there's anything to see, really. I'd like to make another recording about the laws of marriage officiation. It's in different states, depending on which states you're officiating in. Each state has different laws about who could officiate at a wedding. Now, I myself reside in the state of New York, and New York is not extremely strict about clergy, except for in the 5 boroughs. So there's 2 separate issues: is New York State and New York City. Now, in New York State, any clergy, ordained clergy, can sign a marriage license. So if you receive smicha as a rabbi, you can sign a marriage license. Sometimes I know some rabbis prefer not to sign a marriage license for whatever reason. You could go to another rabbi who's there at the wedding can sign, and so forth. Though I would suggest they should, at least if they didn't perform the actual ceremony, they should ask the couple, do you want to be married legally? They say yes, and you can declare them as such. But if you do just a regular Siddur Kedushin, you don't have to say anything special. Just being Masar Kedushin is sufficient, or really having any part in the ceremony when the Sheva Brachas, being an Eid Kedushin, reading the Ksuba even would seem should be good enough. That's as far as a Jewish wedding. And a civil wedding, or a non-denominational wedding, a religious wedding of any other religion, again, the clergy person who officiates can sign, and as long as they're duly ordained, they can sign. There's the question about the online ordinations, like the Universal Life Church, as we discussed in other states. Each state is different. It would seem there are certain counties in New York that are not fans of the online ordination. I know Westchester, and I think one of the other lower Hudson Valley areas, they're not really too fond of the online ordinations. I would check with the clerk if you are ordained online before performing a wedding in New York, if you received the online ordination, and particularly if you don't have a congregation and so forth. Even though it doesn't really make much of a difference, having a congregation would seem to lend a bit more gravitas to the ordination. Other officiants can include judges, mayors, town executives, and so forth. I'm not sure about county executives. I would assume probably as well. The state of New York marriage law specifies that ship captains are not eligible to perform weddings in New York State. It also mentions that people who are the equivalent of clergy, or the leaders of groups like the Ethical Humanist Society, which are atheist groups that have, or non-theistic groups or non-religious groups that have meetings regularly, weekly, and people who lead these type of congregations, which are basically the same as clergy. One thing I really feel strongly, when you look at the First Amendment and so forth, atheism is also a religion in a sense. It's a religious belief, and there are congregations that are non-theistic or non-religious, even culturally Jewish organizations like they call, which is quite appalling, like the humanistic Judaism movement, and they have people they call humanistic rabbis who are atheists. Makes me very uncomfortable to think of such a thing. Personally, it's even a bit offensive, but as far as the laws of the state of New York are concerned, a humanistic rabbi can, of course, license, and that I don't have a problem with, personally, of course. If you go through some other ordination program, it should also be accepted, any type of ordination program, and even, Rav Amani, whatever. And also, if you're an ordained cantor, there are different things, other religions, a deacon, and so forth. If they can perform a wedding according to their religion, they can sign a marriage license. Now you have another, and even, there's chaplaincy organizations that will certify chaplains. It would seem that they could also perform marriages in the state of New York. Now, New York City is a whole different story, because unlike the rest of the state of New York City requires clergy to register. That's the rule, like we mentioned in another video in Virginia, that officiants in Virginia have to register with the state, and in New York City you have to register with the city. It's quite an interesting process. It costs, I think, about $14 or $15, and then it's good for life. It's worthwhile if at any time in your life as a clergy person you pastor a congregation, you're a congregational rabbi, priest, minister, imam, whatever it is, really anywhere in America, or really anywhere in the world for that matter, to register in New York City. I would say, because it's something that only costs $15 and it's good for life, chaperein, as we say in Yiddish, take advantage of this opportunity if you have a congregation, because one of the things that New York City requires, although it's not the only way, but one of the ways to become a registered wedding officiant in New York City is to pastor a congregation. Now, you don't necessarily need to be ordained for that. If the congregation will supply a letter saying that you are the pastor, the rabbi, the priest, whatever of the congregation, even without an ordination, that is acceptable. So again, like we said in Pennsylvania, if you're ordained with Universal Life Church or a similar group, and you have a congregation, you should be able to register in New York City. As what I've heard is that Universal Life Church now has a New York City package, quote unquote. It costs a little bit more, not that much. They'll supply a letter that New York City will accept. I have ordained people that have been accepted by the city of New York. One example was a friend of mine led services in the synagogue a few times, so I ordained him as a cantor, and I gave him a letter saying that he was an associate cantor in our congregation, which was true, even though it was only briefly so, and he didn't receive any money for it, but it's indeed true that he, by virtue of leading services, he's considered an associate cantor in the congregation, and the city of New York accepted that, and he is still legally able to sign a marriage license in New York City. He did it a few times, never really made a big business out of it, but once in a while, if I can't make it into something in the city, since he lives in the city, I might send folks to him, although he's gotten a little bit more busy, that really would be shaykh for him. But still, if you have some position in your church or synagogue or mosque, even, like I said, even you're not the official cantor, but you lead services once in a while. You're a gabbai, you're a balkore, something like that. One of the things that you can register in New York City is as a cantor, and you should be able to get a letter from your congregation to officiate at weddings in New York City. And I would again say it's worthwhile, something to chaperein that you can always do for the rest of your life. And all the other officiants, mayors and so forth, also have to register with the city. If you live in the city, you have to go into City Hall and sign the book. When I did it, I didn't live in the city, but still, I happened to be in the city, so I went and I signed the big book, and they gave me the certificate with the letter, with the number and everything, the serial number, and it's quite a nice thing. And also, like we discussed, how in Pennsylvania there's so much of gray area. In New York City, there's no gray area. You know for sure, if this person is registered in the city, that they can officiate at a wedding in the city. Now, it doesn't matter where the marriage license came from. As long as it's anywhere in the state of New York. But what does matter is that that where the wedding took place. So if you get one of the first weddings I did in New York City, the couple was from Albany. They got their marriage license in Albany. I married them in New York City, and I had to be registered in New York City to perform the wedding. If you get a marriage license in New York City, I think it has to be used in the city, I'm pretty sure, as opposed to anywhere else in the state that you get a marriage license. It's good anywhere, really, in the whole state. And I appreciate that aspect of the New York City licensure, that you do get that. I had a case where there was a couple had a license at that same time. Another one of the first weddings I did in New York City, the couple got their license in New York City, but they wanted to get married at their home in Jersey. So what I told them was they have to bring their witnesses over the George Washington Bridge into New York State, to New York City. And there I just quickly said, "Do you guys want to be married?" They said yes. And the witnesses heard, and I said, "According to the laws of the city of New York, I declare you married." And then we got back in the car and went over to their home in Jersey, where I performed a more traditional ceremony. And so that's what you have to do if you have, from different states and so forth, that the actual ceremony was then done in the jurisdiction where it has to be done. Filling out the marriage license in New York. Again, the license that you get in the city is different than the license that you will get in other places. Most places you just have to write most parts of New York State, you have to write the village, town, or city in which the marriage took place, and the county in which it took place. And you have to be aware, because there are differences in the municipalities of the state of New York between a town, an incorporated village, and a city. And so you should be aware of where exactly you are, as well as what county you are in. And you can, for example, if your area has, a mayor, it is either a village or a city. Towns do not have mayors, they have town supervisors, generally. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm pretty sure. So, for example, I live in the town of Bethel. There are no cities or villages in the town of Bethel. The lowest level of government. That the most direct level of government is your town government, and then there's also the school district, which is Monticello School District, where I live. There are the school districts that are within the borders of the town of Bethel as well, but there is no village structure there, as there are in other places. For example, in the town of Thompson, you have the village of Monticello. The town of Mamakating, you'll have villages of Wurtsboro and Bloomingburg, and so forth. When I was a kid, we lived in the incorporated village of Floral Park in Nassau County, which is the town of Hempstead. But on the marriage license, you would write the village of Floral Park, and you would check the box for a village and write Nassau County, and so forth. And each place, again, in accordance with the laws of that location. And the main thing is to make sure they don't exactly ask the address. So if you would put, if you're close by something, the town and the county, as long as you have a town that's in the county, you'll be okay. But try to be right. You have to put the time and the date of the wedding as well, and then the officiant puts his name and address, I believe, and signs. And then the two witnesses will print their name and sign their name. If you only have one witness, you only need one witness. You don't need two witnesses. In New York is what I've heard from most clerks, but it's better to have two if possible, but not necessary. New York City is a bit different. The New York City marriage license, you put the address of the location of where the wedding took place, and perhaps even the name, if it's the name of a restaurant or a park or something like the museum, something like that, a church or a synagogue. You could also put that there in the mosque, whatever, church, synagogue, mosque, temple, whatever it is. Put that in there as well, and the address, as well as the county where, which of the 5 boroughs it took place in. But again, also the time. That's important because of the 24-hour waiting period, to make sure that it's within the time period of when you're allowed to perform the wedding. And what is rather unique in New York City, which I haven't seen other places, is not only do the witnesses sign, but the bride and groom also sign the marriage license, which is something you don't often see. And also, the officiant signs in the bottom. As it's interesting because he's writing his name and address elsewhere, and then he signs in the bottom. It's important, if you move, to call 311. Really should do it first thing in the morning, to let them know if you change your address once you're already registered to officiate in New York City. And of course, not to perform any weddings in the city of New York with a marriage license